We are back, and we are back with one of my favorite people on the planet.
Wow, thank you.
The ambassador, the man, Ambassador Andrés Roemer. So you may or may not know a lot about him, but he has the funnest title ever. He's the ambassador for the free flow of knowledge. Imagine that. And I would love to know exactly what that means.
Me too. Exactly. We're in the same search.
Ambassador to UNESCO. And what you are, and what I adore about you and what you do is, I think of you as the platform provider, the ideas maker. You invented something super cool, Ciudad de las Ideas, not to mention that you are a famous writer and you have all this artistic bent, and we all have really been enriched by who you are and what you have provided to the planet. But I want to start out our conversation today. First of all, welcome and thank you so much for joining us and spending the time with us this afternoon. I'd love to start our conversation today with a word, ideas. Because I think it's ideas that lead to knowledge. And I would just love to learn a little about your journey. And I know our audience will be interested in that journey. How did you make that leap from, person to ideas maker, to platform provider for ideas with something as amazing as La Ciudad de las Ideas?
Gracias. Well, I would like to start before with the word ideas with the word gratitude. Because Radia, what you have been doing all the time has been very motivating, and you are really not only a personality in terms of xHuman and coevolution, and always interested in prosperity when you relate technology with emotions, with humanity, with what can we do better for the world. But also you have been always a very good friend, and you're always enthusiastic and fun, and you have of course, a very high IQ, but an enormously high emotional intelligence. When you came to Ciudad de las Ideas, everybody loved you. And not only that, after that, you start doing a network and you keep working and you're always creating. So for me, when you told me that if I would join you, I mean, whatever I can do with you and to add with your projects, thank you, and it's an honor.
Thank you. The honor is all mine. Thank you.
About ideas, well, there is a why. I strongly believe, there was a Nobel Prize in economics, Paul Roemer, that actually I think he got to the point, to the issue. It's not what makes prosper a society if they have oil or good weather or bad weather, or if they have, I don't know, natural resources. The big difference between a rich country, a rich community, a rich society, it has to do with three things. But the first one has to do with ideas, good ideas. If I have an apple and you have an apple, Bernard Shaw said, so I will give you my apple, you will give me your apple, we will eat our apples, and at the end there will not be apples. Right. But if you have an idea and I have another idea, and you tell me, Andres, why you don't come here to this building next to the UN, and we start talking, probably after this incredible opportunity for both of us, I will go out from here and I will say, well, Radia gave me an idea that, given the fact that, so as you can understand, and you know more than anyone, we didn't have Einstein without Newton, or Newton without Kepler, or Kepler without Galileo. An idea grows with an idea. Yes. So when you really are concerned about what makes prosperity happen, the first thing you have to know is that it has to do with ideas. And to have ideas, you have to create an environment for ideas. Mm-hmm. You have to have freedom of choice, freedom of expression, freedom of association. But you also need institutions that protect that freedom. Yes. Institutions that protect institutional property rights, and that really help people to be able to develop, to create and liberate all their creativity. And of course, besides that, you need a market, a free market. Yes. There's not only a free market of goods and services, but a free market of ideas. Mm-hmm. Of course, you have to be concerned, and more when we talk about these goals from the UN, that there are many people that they don't have access to these markets, as you mentioned, to Kosovo. Sometimes there is a dilemma between internet and food.
Yes.
But at the end, if you have internet, probably you will start having more food. I mean, at the end, not in the long run, in the very short run, we have a lot of studies and cases that thanks to internet and mobile phones, many people in very poor countries have been able to start doing trading and start doing businesses and start changing their own lives and start having much more food. So our concern was the why. And with Ricardo Salinas Pliego and the group of people, we started saying, well, you know, ideas based on property rights, on freedom of expression, on institutional frameworks, etc., are very important. Because ideas then they translate into knowledge. There are three kinds of knowledges. First is the typical knowledge that you read a book and you learn.
Yes.
And if you learn, you earn. That's one way. The other way of knowledge has to do with on-the-job training, learning by doing. It really has to be with an experience. It's not that you can learn a book, you have to go to the swimming pool and swim. And the third knowledge is much more harder to grasp. It's come through intuition. I mean, you know that it's bad for you to smoke a cigarette.
Right.
And you know what it's bad for you to, you know you have to eat salads and fruit and no carbs sometimes, or other people have the need to eat vitamins and proteins or whatever. But even though we know that it's bad for ourselves, we're still doing things against us.
Yes.
Here, this kind of knowledge is much more harder because it's not that they explain you at UN, you know, you have to take care of the water and of the climate change and be careful. Because even that you know that it's much more profound. There are things within you that are very self-destructive. So in those cases, I agree sometimes with a kind of libertarian paternalism that I have to not manipulate you, but to push you a little bit to that way.
Absolutely.
So there are three ways to make ideas turn on in collective intelligence and knowledge, and that have the free flow of them. And they have to do with these three basic things. And one is, well, what kind of books you are reading, or what kind of ideas. It's not the same thing to make a project of ideas based on, I don't know, of I will pray that you have good health. Or it's very different that I actually teach you some medicine.
Right. Correct.
It's very different. So what we really were concerned since the beginning was to separate what was a good kind of knowledge. Secondly, I'm not talking about education.
Right.
Education is very important, but we really believe that there are people with a lot of education, even in the Nazi era, in the Kosovo, when they suffered their terrible tragedy, with a lot of PhDs, but they didn't have critical thinking.
That's correct.
There are people in 1941, there were like 80% of the people in 1941 when they talk about the final resolution against the Jews. 80% of them had PhDs. Heidegger was a very smart guy. Of course, Goebbels was a very cultivated person. They have education. Many people vote for leaders and they're very well educated, but they don't have critical thinking. They don't question the why.
Yes.
And we are not concerned about what you will learn with xHuman, because knowledge will change. The important thing is how you learn it. How do you question what you're learning? How do you search for the answers? That's where coevolution will happen. Because self-learning of the machines are very, very powerful and deep issue. It's not artificial intelligence by itself. It's now a machine that is learning new ways to do things that you and me will never have any idea. And creativity is happening with the machines.
That's right.
But do they are aware of what they are doing? Do they know if they won the game of chess, even that they did it through self-learning? Do they are aware that that's good or bad? That's where humanity comes along. That's where the free flow of ideas comes along, because free is not only free of, it's free of ideology, it's free of manipulation, it's free of fake news, it's free of fake ideas. I mean, it's really free of a very powerful thing named disonancias cognitivas. I mean, we lie to ourselves. We have cognitive dissonance all the time.
That's right.
We have a lot of problems with our brain. That's when we're talking about free knowledge. And for that, you have to never stop questioning even what I just told you now. where it comes from, why I think the way I think. How can I learn more things from a different perspective?
What led me to the Exponential Human was untraditional in and of itself. And you talk about the difference between education and knowledge, education and ideas, in essence, education and innovation.
Yes.
I started out this journey as an organizational strategist trying to understand what the fourth industrial revolution impacts were on organizations.
Great.
I was in my bubble of corporate America thinking about organizations and that impact. And what I found instead was that this revolution is not about organizations at all. That was the first three. This revolution is about humanity. It's really changing the power within our own hands. It's changing it from a world where we were coded by religious code, we were coded by legislative code, we were coded by moral code, to a world where we humans are more and more coded by software code, a code that was just introduced something like, 60 or so years ago. And that code is so part of these exponential machines that I started with. I started looking at this concept of machines that are autonomous, that are brilliant, that have gone past that tool with us, the owners of the tool, using them to become something like, I have a family member at home and it's a Roomba. And when I'm ready to clean, I'm like, okay, you got this.
Just press the bottom and it goes.
And you wipe. And I've got two of them and they're siblings and they clean together. And that, to me, is reflective of a change. We're not just working with these machines. We're getting to know them, they're getting to know us. And they don't only gain from learning from us, like what we say about Siri and Alexa, where we have to be listened to, and sometimes that's where the nervousness is, oh, how much information are they getting? But they need to learn. They need to learn what we're doing for them to be better. But what I find really interesting is once they learn what you're doing, they come and they code me with what you told them makes sense. So in essence, we start to code each other. And to me, that's where the exponentiality comes in, especially when you think about us having a digital double online versus us being in physical form, and what that world looks like, us being able to almost have what I call a global hive, a hive mind, if you ever watched the Borg on Star Trek, but having that hive mind, not one that is controlled, but one that is in duality, right? Like we can sit here and have our single minds, but it takes absolutely nothing. In fact, are we ever plugged out of our hive minds, out of our society of friends online that are everywhere? And I would love to hear your thoughts on how that kind of world should be impacting something like the United Nations. They put this out, and some of the ways in which they work is exactly as they did 70 years ago. They're an older institution at a time when the individual human really was waiting for them to hand them this information and then follow almost legislative code, moral code, that sort of thing. But today, the individual human has that much power and access. And what I see at the UN is there's a lack of I don't want to say ability, whoever's listening, but to leverage that access to meet critical goals like this. So we'd just love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
You mentioned so many provocative things. First of all, I'm very happy to listen and to hear from you, because when I read the book of Schwab from the World Economic Forum about the fourth industrial revolution, he said it was more or less something like, it's like the third one, but with the depth and the speed and the profundity of what is going on. It's much more exponential and much more profound. But I like much more what you just said. It has to do much more with what it means to be human.
Yes.
Of course, he touches also that big question, because we will have a new identity. Yes. It's very different. Everything that we learned from Darwin about adaptability and natural selection and sexual selection.
Yes.
And it's going to change.
Yes.
Evolution, it's a different way now to understand who we are. And we're not only exchanging things with technology in this fourth revolution, the most interesting thing for me is that we are also algorithms.
Yes.
I mean, somos algoritmos.
Yes.
I mean, today, even with the Twitter, they use me, my information. I'm used by they know my brain better than I do mine, my own, in terms of Google, Facebook. They understand I have a reptilian brain, that I need immediate gratification, that I will have followers, and that I have a tribal line, and I want to have likes, and all these kind of things I have been used to. But when it becomes even much more deeply seriously, this fourth industrial revolution, it has to do when we will start editing our genes.
Yes.
And CRISPR-9, and there is a thing named transcriptome.
Yes.
Which I think that's the biggest challenge of the xHuman thing. Not only because there are many questions about inequality, access, equity, etc. But what you were mentioning, what will be actually to be human? What we will start designing our babies,
Exactly.
and this is not far from today.
No.
And of course, we have institutions that are thinking the 19th century when we were almost in the 22nd century. And this needs not, I don't like the word regulation. I like the way thinking.
Yes.
The word of, we have really to think the ethical implications of these things. I mean, we have to think many things.
Yes.
But talking about the UN, there are many institutions devoted to many things. But for example, UNESCO, they're devoted to science, to communication, to culture. I think that's the institution where they're part of the shareholders, but this is a new world. The shareholders are Google and Apple and Amazon. And if we don't bring everybody to the table and to understand what will happen, who will pay, who will benefit, who will suffer, what will happen, and we just keep going in the flow of the exponential Moore law,
Yes.
it's going to be very difficult to then start not regretting many things.
Agreed.
So I think it's a great opportunity, but the problem is that technology grows exponentially, all these inventions, all these things, but our way of thinking is still linear.
Exactly.
And it's, how do I make it not linear? I don't know. We don't know. Probably we need technology to think like that.
Right.
But so far, what we can start doing is, well, which are the big questions in terms of what will mean to be human in the very near future? Who are the stakeholders? And what should be concerned, and what should we allow, and what should we regulate in a much more moderate way? It's not an easy thing. This fourth revolution, always it has to do something with human, as you mentioned it. I mean, the first, even with the farming revolution, but before the first one. But today, the challenges are very different. It's not only about employment.
No.
It's about leisure. It's about timing. It's about your purpose in life.
Right.
It's a beautiful challenge. And I'm very happy that you're working on these topics. The UN institutions, they need a revolution. They need a revolution. We have to think in these goals.
Right.
But what could be the impact on each of the topics? For example, you put water or poverty or whatever. And on the other side, what the fourth revolution could help to make these things happen in a much more efficient way. Secondly, that everybody's included. Third, I know that MIT, for example, is working on that.
Yes, there.
And there are many other institutions. As you know, I belong to Singularity University and exponential organizations. When you mentioned that it's not organizations, I was going to tell you that we should talk with Salim Ismail.
Yes.
He will have a big debate about it. but I mean, you're putting the questions on the table.
And I think that was the point of this, right? I was looking to do, and I keep telling people that this was never a theory of assertion. It was a theory of exploration.
Absolutely.
I came across something that I thought was interesting, And I thought the world wanted to have this conversation. I wasn't looking at it from an anthropological perspective, as some of our forefathers have. I was looking at it from an inclusive perspective. And that brings me to what you were saying about inclusion. I think at the UN, it's become a major concern, right? There's this gulf between what is real and what is real. So on the one side, you're looking at organizations with a great deal of wealth that are saying, my goodness, robots are going to replace jobs. Should we have a basic income? People are soon going to be on the beach and they're not going to need to work anymore. And this is this wonderful world here. And then on the other side, you have people who can't eat. They have no shelter. The gulf is getting so wide and so deep. And we're still looking at these 2030 goals that, yes, were adopted in 2015, but we have 10 years. Climate change doesn't look like it's anywhere near. Gender equality, forget about that. Poverty is frightening. I mean, what's happening with refugees? When
in this, really, I disagree in a way.
Do you?
Yes, of course, we have big problems, very, very big problems. But in relation to 10 years ago and 20 years ago and 30 years
That's
ago,
true.
Things have evolved very well. It's not that I'm a big supporter of Steven Pinker's work, but I think he has a point in many things. Of course, I also agree that, from my perspective, actually, I don't know if I agree with you or not in this topic, poverty, it's much more a problem than equality. Equality, it's a very important problem, and we should never underestimate it.
Right.
But the real problem is access to health, to education, to
Food,
to housing,
shelter.
to food.
Yes.
If you are extremely rich and have enough to live and have the chance to become very rich and have social mobility, it's not the gap between you and me what I'm concerned, is that at least everyone has access to the main needs. Now, in terms of the UN, the institutional arrangement, I'm talking about UNESCO, which I know more than all the institutions from the UN, that the institution by itself needs a revolution, because, I mean, they're very concerned with machine learning and artificial intelligence. It's like the main purpose today of UNESCO.
Wow.
But the problem is that you don't have the shareholders there. And you need an international institution like UN that brings to the table not only the ambassadors from Russia and Mexico and France and whatever. They need to bring, we have to create a new UN where you have, of course, the voice of the people that do not have voice.
Yes.
But in addition, today the power is not in the hands probably of the president of I don't know where. It's in Jeff Bezos, as he's in the owner of Google and Facebook and this is very different, because we can start having a lot of discussions, but we need to bring them to the table, because we have to understand that as we're having a new idea of what human means and coevolution will happen and what does all those implications. There is also a new border in relation of who has the power, who has sovereignty, what means a country, what means a community.
Yes.
Because the community that you have in Facebook and in Twitter and in Instagram, and I mean, there are many levers that we have to work.
Absolutely.
And I think we need that at these kind of institutions like UN, that it's 2 blocks from here, or less than that, a new invitation to new kind of members.
Yes.
It's not like on the side. It's like there.
Yes. It's an extremely great point, and I'm so glad you brought it up, because one of the conversations I've been having recently is that there are people online with bigger echo chambers, we call them echo chambers, than countries.
Absolutely.
And with those types of followers, sometimes you can find leaders that can lead people down that path of misinformation and disinformation. And if we at the UN, or advisors like I to the UN, are not figuring out how to engage these digital heroes, these digital leaders, how are we going to move forward with goals like this, which are all about everybody?
I agree.
Ultimately.
Absolutely. As you know, that the mission of UNESCO, of course, like all the UN institutions, has to do with peace. And with peace, of course, prosperity, and to to actually be able to have inclusiveness with prosperity. But at UNESCO, the main line comes from a person that said, well, all wars began in the mind of the people, so we have to work with the mind of the people to have empathy and sympathy, etc. Yes. But when you have organizations, digital organizations, that it's very easy to become manipulated. Yes. If you live in an era where there is a lot of fake news and fake science and fake rumors and fake of everything, yes. You have to say, hey. What does it mean to be aware? And what's the responsibility of these kind of companies? And I strongly recommend to read, of course, Tristan Harris. I don't know if you have read him, but he's very devoted to these kind of topics. And to propose, I don't know the way, but I know that there is a problem. As you mentioned at the beginning, this is to explore, no? Yes. And we have to bring questions, probably not answers, but questions.
With questions, right.
And one question that I want to bring to this conversation is, how can we create or change these multilateral institutions to bring to the table the main shareholders that are bringing the confusion in the mind of the people?
Yes.
Because if UNESCO, which is, again, the institution that I know better, has as its mission to have empathy and to have good communication, because as you know, UNESCO is communication.
Right.
We're missing something in the 21st century. And that's part of xHuman, because xHuman has to do with what it moves us.
Yes.
How can we learn and have this free flow of knowledge? But this is a big concern that I think they are not addressing. They are talking about the problems and the concern, but it's like name dropping. It's not work itself.
That's right.
And I don't have any idea, and I'm talking too much of things that are happening that I don't have any idea. But what I can feel is if that's happening, they should communicate it better to the world.
You're absolutely right. Thank you, sir.
No,
appreciate you spending the time with us.
Igualmente.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Likewise.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Hello.
you.